Hi everyone, thanks for being here. This is Monica Shimonik with Moms Unshackled, and for those who don't know me, I help moms in family court build healing and empowerment systems for themselves. So the right mindset in this situation, if you're stuck in the family court, this is for moms and dads, okay? The mindset that you're bringing forth with you in your daily life, with your friends, with your coworkers, with your partners, your romantic partners, and how you carry yourself in the actual courtroom. The mindset is collectively very much in a victim, defeatist, lack mindset. Now, that's not your fault. This is a system that has been built so that when you enter it, you kind of like by default enter into this sort of line of thinking. So family court is designed to put you into a state of victimhood, like from the get-go. Like the minute you walk in, you're no longer the parent of your own child. Have you noticed that? Like the minute you walk in, suddenly like some random stranger has control of your child, and you know, so and we just kind of accept that as a collective. We just accept that that's the way it is, and oh, I'm in court now, so therefore I don't have any rights anymore. So we kind of like unknowingly waive our rights the minute we enter court. And so when we do that, we subconsciously enter into a victim way of being automatically. And so the problem with family court is that it's an institution of oppression. And so when you're in the family court, you're not really going to be like active with your creative thinking and your advocacy and your if you are like an activist, you're not really going to behave like one in the court system. And because of that, we're not getting any reform. Family court has historically just done nothing but cause generations of implosion. So so here, let me ask you a question. Who is going to fix this system? Is it going to be the president? Is Donald Trump going to fix this? Are legislators going to fix this? Are lawyers going to fix this? Are judges going to fix this? Who else? Are there any regulatory agencies that are going to take care of this? So Department of Justice, the branch of the American with Disabilities Act that oversees the operation of the courts to make sure that they're following the American with Disabilities Act. Are they going to fix the court system? Is the Supreme Court going to fix the court system? Is the right appeal? Is the snowflake appellant going to fix this system? You know, who's going to do it? Who's going to fix the system? I mean, what other options are there? Let's see. The state's attorney. Can we get criminal charges pressed against these judges who are taking kids away from parents? Are any of those entities going to fix this system? The answer is no, because I know, because I have pursued remedies in those systems and it didn't work. There's no one home. There's no building, like there's no one actually sitting behind a desk regulating the family courts. In my opinion, I believe that there is an address and a name on the website. Like I call that window dressing. It's like when you put all the pretty stuff in the windows and nothing's for sale. You know, you walk into the store and you're like, I want those shoes in the window, and like those shoes aren't for sale. Like we just put the shoes in the window to make it look like we have a store, but we really don't have nothing. You know, like you walk in, it's just an empty room, you know, maybe a toilet or something. So I really believe that these regulatory agencies are empty rooms with no one sitting there. Like it's literally like a broom closet, you know, with an address and a website. So I'm mostly joking, but they're not going to fix the system. Okay, the Supreme Court, maybe if the right snowflake parent makes the right, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I you know, if the right parent does the right thing, possibly. But then even if the Supreme Court makes a turnaround, getting the lower courts to uphold the Supreme Court decision is a whole nother challenge, and that could result in more litigation and more appeals and blah blah blah. And so here's the question: who's going to fix the system? Well, let me ask you before we go there. Who fixed the women's suffrage movement? Who took care of people of color drinking out of their own, like having to drink out of a different drinking fountain? Who were the people who made it so that people of color could go to schools with Caucasian people? Who was it that got was it 2016 where gay people could get married in all 50 states? Why do we now have ramps in all public buildings? Who did that? Who did all that work? That was us. The public did all that, okay? And so with family court reform, I have been studying parents for about maybe 7, 8 years now, where I've been like talking to parents and interviewing parents. I think I interviewed close to 100 parents when I wrote my book a few years back. So I've probably interviewed, I don't know, maybe 500 to 600 parents by now. The collective consciousness of parents in the family court system is to do nothing and to let and other entities fix the system. Like, let the legislators fix the system, let the judges fix the system. They're kind of sitting back and waiting for the bigger agencies to fix things. Now, the reason parents aren't standing into that activist energy and the activist mindset, the reason they're not doing that is because they're scared. They're afraid of retaliation. They're afraid if they dare stand up for their rights, they're going to look like psychos. I can't tell you how many moms have told me that they won't stand up for themselves in court because they're afraid of looking aggressive and crazy. So a lot of you watching right now are thinking like, hell no, I'm not going to be an activist in my case. That's crazy. You don't know my judge. My judge is going to punish me, blah, blah, blah. And you think that being an activist in your case and asserting your rights on the record and standing up for yourself and pushing back against court orders such as you must communicate with your ex by phone once a week to talk about your child. If an order like that triggers your post-traumatic stress disorder, then that order is in a violation of the American with Disabilities Act. So how many of you are actually going to fight back and push back and say, no, Your Honor, it violates my rights under the American with Disabilities Act? Like, how many of you are really going to do that? You know, and you have a lunatic judge who will just scream her head off at you. You know, I know Danny's watching, you know about Jane Emmons. So, I mean, there's a lot of crazy, there are literally psychotic judges who just scream their heads off at parents. I have been in front of one personally. How many of you are actually going to assert your rights on the record in a calm and collective, non-defeatist mindset? I know that you're scared. I know that it's hard to stand up and like assert yourself to these crazy, horrible people. But let me ask you something. Is this working? Is what you're doing now working? Are you happy? Like, are you living out your purpose right now in basically living in slavery where you're forced to go to co-parenting counseling with someone who used to abuse you? This is for men and women. Are you living out your purpose and living out the best version of yourself by complying with these sort of arrangements where you have to codependency parent with your ex? And not have the liberty to choose the kind of relationship you want with your ex. Because that's one of my issues, is that the court believes that they have the right to dictate the nature of the relationship you have with your ex. So, like, why is the government directing the manner in which you communicate with a private party? Like, you have the right to construct your relationships as you see fit. You don't have to co-parent. There's no law that says anywhere that says you have to co-parent. It's not child abuse to not co-parent. So and so what the court does is it forces that hi Johnny, it forces you into that dependency mindset. Like you now become a victim. Like just because you're being court ordered to communicate with your abuser in a manner that is harmful to your health, literally. Not only does it violate the American with Disabilities Act, but it violates your right to choose your relationships as you see fit, which is a violation of the First Amendment. So if you want to learn more about the First Amendment and how it pertains to family law, go to fixfamilycourts.com and become a member and learn more through that venue. But so when you enter into court orders where you don't have a choice to set boundaries with somebody, like you are literally being forced to not have boundaries. You're being forced to allow this toxicity into your life. You're being prohibited by the government from setting up a protective barrier to protect your health. So things like that is what makes you a victim, and it reduces your ability to stand in your own power. So you guys are so afraid of defending yourself, and like this isn't legal advice, so don't go and break court orders. But what if you just simply didn't follow those court orders? Like, what if you just said, take me to court for contempt. I'm not going to communicate with this person. All this person does is scream at me and hang up on me. and alienates my child and blah, blah, blah. And it's just drama. Every Monday night at 8 p.m., it's drama. But I'm court ordered to phone this person. Or for me, in my case, I was court ordered into over 30 sessions with my abuser. What if I had just simply decided not to go? Okay. Because it's good for me to not go. And frankly, I have the right to decide where I go and where my body goes, which buildings I go into, and which human beings I communicate with. So what if you just simply said no, and then just allowed to whatever is going to unfold, like, you go to court for contempt, and then you can say, this violates my rights. I have the right to be healthy. I want to be healthy, and having this arrangement is bad for my health, and I'm defending myself, Your Honor. So like, what is stopping you from doing that? I'm not saying go and be reckless and break court orders. What I'm saying is, like, what is mentally in your brain, what is stopping you from executing that, and putting yourself first. And so what's happening is, we're not even really going there. We're not even like considering that to be an alternative. We're just like doing it and suffering. So is that working? Is this arrangement working where you're putting yourself in harm's way all the time? And is that working? And not just like co-parenting therapy and all that, but just simply being in court and not wanting to assert your rights on the record because you're afraid of coming off as aggressive and you're afraid of making the judge mad. Is that working for you? Is that dynamic working for you? My opinion is that there's no room for that anymore. That's not working. That hasn't been working for 50 years. It doesn't work to be a victim. It's not working. We're not going to get any reform at all. Now, listen, I'm not saying all of you, everybody, all 22 million parents have to go and like start holding up signs and banging on the court's doors and demanding justice. I don't know who came up with this, or if this is, I don't know where I got this information. I've been meaning to read more into it, but I believe quantum physics theories say that to create something called critical mass, only 1% of a population has to take action. So there was an experiment where there were a bunch of monkeys on some desert island, and the people were dropping potatoes in the sand. I think it's called like the 100th monkey. I'm going to reference it, okay? If I'm botching it up, you're going to get the real reference. Where one monkey, they were eating the potatoes, and the potatoes were full of sand, and they were just eating them anyway. And have you ever eaten something that has sand on it? It's not fun. And so one monkey went and started washing their potato in the lake or in the ocean, and the salt water made the potato taste better, and then the salt water washed away the sand as well. And so the monkey was like, this is awesome, woo! Now the other monkeys, because monkeys are 95% human, so they're kind of like us. They're kind of like, what's that person doing? Because that's what we do, right? When one person's doing something different, like, we're kind of like, why are they doing that? What's that? What is that? And that's, and just a side note, that's another reason why a lot of you aren't really asserting yourself on the record and not challenging court orders. A lot of you would just rather just deal with the abuse than actually say a few sentences and risk being punished, So because you don't want to be that 100th person, you don't want to be that person that does that weird thing. It's easier just to kind of do what everybody else is doing. And so for 50 years, we've kind of just been eating this horrible system or letting it eat us, if you will, and not really doing a lot. We'll contact legislators. We'll write op-eds in the newspaper. We do some stuff, and there's people like Mark Ludwig and Ron and Sherry Palmer that are just blowing it up out there, which is awesome. But generally, we kind of just hold back, and we just allow the inertia. I think that's the right word. Like, allow the status quo. That's a better word. So anyway, back to the monkeys. So this one monkey is washing the potato and eating it, and just, and so it took a long time for like the second and third and fourth monkey to do that, because for a while they're kind of like, and then, so now there's like 5 monkeys doing it, and they're still kind of like the fringe people, like the fringe monkeys, like not really fitting in and all that. And then, long story short, within like a short period of time, all the monkeys were doing the potato washing. And then, this is the freaking amazing part, and then they found that other monkeys in other continents were doing the same thing. So there was some invisible force that allowed that message to reach far, far, far away. I mean, monkeys weren't texting each other in the 50s and like sending emails and Instagrams and stuff saying, yo, you got to go wash your potatoes. So there was something that was that raised the consciousness, and that's something that we don't have a lot of knowledge on. Collective consciousness, we don't have a lot of data on it. It's hard to, you can't really measure it. I mean, but this whole theory of collective consciousness goes back to Socrates. So I'm not going to get into that now, but anyway, so that's kind of like a quantum physics thing that I still haven't yet really researched. But so this is the thing. So my point is, not all parents have to do this. So if there's 20 million parents right now going through this, 1% of that I think is like 200,000, right? I don't know. Maybe that's the right number. If 200,000 parents stood up for themselves, and I'm not saying you all have to go to the Supreme Court. We don't need 200,000 parents going to the United States Supreme Court. What I'm saying is, what if 1% of parents did that thing where they were like, oh, I have to pay the attorney thousands of dollars, the other side's attorney thousands of dollars. Well, no, I'm not putting up with that. I'm going to appeal, and I'm going to say that it's a seizure of my property, blah, blah, blah. And then use arguments like what Ron and Sherry Palmer use to defend yourself. Don't fight best interests, fight the actual laws. And Ron and Sherry have the actual concrete laws that you could use. So what if 1% of us utilized a tool like that? Or 1% of us said, hey, no, the American with Disabilities Act prohibits you from discriminating against me because I had postpartum depression 10 years ago. So it doesn't have to be a big thing. It's just if 1% of parents kind of became disruptive. Now, when I say disruptive, that's a business term. That's a marketing. I think that's a marketing term. I don't mean disruptive like flip the tables over, not that kind of disruptive, but pushing back against, being that person, being the person who climbed the stairs to demand American with Disabilities Act to be passed because there was no wheelchair ramps. There were people who couldn't move their legs who had to literally crawl up the stairs of public buildings to demand that the American with Disabilities Act be enacted. So, and like people, when people of color were being discriminated against, there wasn't 200,000 Martin Luther Kings. There was only one Martin Luther King. There was one Malcolm X. There was one Rosa Parks. So we only need 1% of this population, this family court crusader population, to stand up and do something. So if you decide to, take Ron and Sherry's training or learn your rights, or just simply assert yourselves in a non-victim way in the courts, don't allow yourself to assume the identity that the court wants you to have. Okay. So there is a way to push back, and you could push back smartly and assertively. There are ways to do it. I mean, gosh, and so this is the big takeaway here. To do this, to even get that like grit to do this, you have to be healthy. You don't have to be like perfect weight, perfect blood pressure, blah, 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 but you have to be healthy enough where you can do this and be okay with the outcome. So because so many of this population is disabled and unemployed, it unfortunately when some people who aren't healthy become activists, they and again, I don't fault people for choosing their way. It's more, is it effective? You have to be healthy. You have to have a positive mindset. You have to be not in a victim mindset. You have to be in a crusader, justice mindset. You have to have like a mindset that Martin Luther King had. Now, Martin Luther King was probably scared to death when he made that speech. And he did face retaliation. He paid the ultimate price. So a lot of you are afraid of the retaliation. So, but the thing is this, if you're facing contempt, okay, and again, not legal advice, if you're facing contempt because you chose to put your health first and say, no, I'm not going to go to co-parenting therapy. Okay, not legal advice. I'm not telling you to break court orders. But let's just say that you just said, no, I'm not going to comply with that court order. And you face contempt. So is it really, think about this. Like, without you being like, oh, Monica's giving me legal advice. What I'm saying is, what is the worst possible outcome that could happen with that contempt? I mean, I've been held in contempt before, and my punishment was you're in contempt. That was my punishment. Now, I know that could result in other things, but again, this is what you have to ask yourself. What am I in alignment with? This is just to get you thinking. I'm not saying, I'm not telling you to do anything. What are you in alignment with? Are you in alignment with defending yourself and being assertive and come what may, or is it like, well, I really don't want to be in contempt, so I'm just going to do it this way. So like, make a choice. You have a choice. You have a lot more power in this than you think. So I'm just going to leave it at that, to kind of like, to invite you to think about this a little bit. And so, because this is the thing, if you're held in contempt and you assert a legal argument that works, you can appeal that, and so that's another way of pushing back and being in your personal power. So I am a fan of appeals. I am a fan of going to the Supreme Court, the appellate court, blah, blah, blah. I do believe that that's an effective way to push back, as long as you know what you're doing. So again, do your research, take courses with Ron and Sherry, do what you have to do. So I'm going to leave you with that today. So I just want you, let me just get into something else. So what's going to get you to, what's going to help you manifest that strength to do that is your grit, Grit. The thing with grit is that that's not something that can really be taken away from you by the court. No court is going to say you're not allowed to have grit anymore. So that's something that you still have control over. And grit is free. You don't have to pay for it. You don't have to like hire an $80,000 expert, like people who are going through parental alienation will hire experts from like California and fly them out and have them testify for 3 days. Grit is just as valuable as the best expert witness, in my opinion, because your grit is what's going to give you that strength to put yourself out there and stick your neck out there and make sure that you're standing in that mindset that you want. So grit is self-manufactured. You could do anything you could just manifest it. It's accessible. It's always there if you want to have it, and it's something that you do have control over. So you have a lot more control over your life than you think. You have control over your attitude. You have control over your thoughts, your reactions, and you ultimately do have choices. I mean, a lot of people are like, I have no choice. I have no choice. Yes, you do. You have a lot of choices. You can choose to follow court orders. That's great. Or you could choose not to and come what may. So you still have a choice, you could choose to appeal or you could choose to not appeal. So you still have a lot of choices. And yes, there are consequences to those choices, but that doesn't mean that you don't have those choices. So the consequence of following court orders could be that you're putting yourself in harm's way by putting yourself in a tiny room with your abuser and with no protections. I have clients that are like in this tiny room with a therapist who won't be able to protect them from physical assault, So there's consequences to following court orders, which is doing that. There's consequences to not following those court orders, which is I'm going to put some links momentarily with the monkeys and everything like that. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you all have a good night. Bye-bye.